Welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation podcast.
Welcome to Mintel Little Conversation, where experts bring you fresh ideas and new perspectives on how consumers eat, drink, shop, groom, and think. I'm Dana Mackey, Research Director at Mintel. I'm recording this episode from Chicago, which is Mintel's US headquarters, but we have a global panel of experts today talking about how COVID-19 has changed some of the consumer trends that we've been tracking across our regions. So I want to start by introducing ourselves.
Hi, I'm Diana Kelter. I'm also based out of Chicago, and I am a senior trends analyst focusing on the North America region.
Hi, I'm Vanessa. I'm based in São Paulo, and I'm the senior trends analyst for Latin America.
Hi, I'm Helen Fricker, based in London, and I'm the trends manager for the EMEA region.
My name's Alicia Young, and I'm the trends manager for the APAC region, based in Sydney.
So I'm very jealous of our trends analysts because on the research side, we spend a lot of time at our desks analyzing data to understand consumer behavior. But you trends analysts are usually out in the world, seeing how these consumer trends play out in the marketplace. I really have no doubt that we've seen some acceleration or shift of our trends in 2020 because of everything that's happening this year. I want to start by talking about the experience is all trend, which is really about consumers' desire for experiential offerings. So Diana, can you start us off by talking about what's happening with this trend right now?
Yeah, so this trend at Mintel has really been on our trends database for quite some time. I would say it really started taking off and seeing a surge in popularity around 2010 and beyond. So the 2008 recession really played a role in driving this desire for experiences. People didn't feel like after that recession they could buy a house or buy some of those traditional things. So experiences kind of became that buffer of what they wanted to spend their money on. And then obviously coordinating with that since 2010, we've also seen the rise in social media popularity, which led to this term we're all familiar with, FOMO, the fear of missing out. So for the past decade, that was really driving a lot of the desire to have these experiences. People would see their friends at a concert or at this cool new retail store that had all these experiential offerings, and it would just motivate people to want to also display what they're doing. Obviously in 2020, in the age of COVID-19, FOMO has all but disappeared. I think what we're seeing obviously is that everything's shut down, so there isn't experiences, but even for people who do want to display to their friends what they're doing, it's almost with this fear of judgment now. You don't want to get called out for not social distancing or not doing that. So we're seeing that it's really experiences have almost returned to if someone is having a friend over or going to somewhere, they're doing it for the sake of the experience, not to showcase to their friends what they're doing. So I think for brands, it kind of creates this takeaway that it's if you're returning to this experience for the sake of experience, it brings that equation back to what is the value of the experience and not just what aesthetics are you offering purely for social media. So I think it's kind of a shift for brands to think about what is the tangible value of an experience they're offering.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. In the kind of European region, we've really seen a move to those experiences that are almost like educational. So we're doing things at home, we're learning how to bake, how to cook, and brands are getting involved and teaching us. And it really gives a new element to the experience. It's almost, as I said, like an educator. And then we're almost not afraid to show off if we did fail at making that amazing cake that actually doesn't look like a caterpillar. But it's actually we're kind of almost self-improving. We've been given this time, I think, at home to slow down and actually learn new skills and focus on what we want to do more for enjoyment and self-development rather than just showing off to our kind of social media followers.
That's a really interesting point, actually. We've seen a real shift from those extroverted kind of experiences, which are purely led, well, not purely led, but certainly very much led by showing off to people and having that social media following, and kind of that shift back to more introverted personal experiences where we're kind of, like Helen just said, growing and learning and doing things for ourselves. Which does, I think, give a really interesting opportunity for brands to hop in and create those more personal kind of both experiences, but also relationships with consumers as well.
Yeah, I agree too. I think very similar things have been happening here in Latin America. And we've seen a very interesting move from brands, actually, because they have been offering content, product-related content to these consumers through this experience, but in more of like a knowledge way. So they're showing consumers what's the history of the product that they are consuming, where it comes from, what's the cultural relevance of that product. So it's also about getting to know more about your own culture and the ingredients you're using at home to cook, as Helen said, from like an individual standpoint, like a culturally connected standpoint. So that's been also very relevant for consumers because that was not a move that was happening before. And they are also very interested about it too. The experience goes further, that goes beyond just having fun or just being on their screens. They really want to know and feel that they got enriched from the content they are seeing.
So last time we, Diane and I had a podcast episode, actually, we were talking about the power of public shaming as a way to keep people in their quarantine zones. And Diana, you mentioned that that's one of the reasons people aren't posting about their experiences is because there's a little bit of fear of backlash. I know that's clearly happening here in the US. Is that happening in your regions as well? Like people are, if someone were to post their day at the beach, people would jump on and comment and troll them?
I think in the UK particularly, it seems to be the media that are really pushing this. I'm sure a lot of people might have seen photos from around the world of our Super Saturday when the pubs opened and it was the middle of London, it looked like it was New Year's Eve. I think that's very minimal. I think people are actually much more cautious about going out. It is really a small group of people that are doing that. And I've not witnessed anything on social media that you'd call shaming. I think people are more, I've actually noticed recently as in the UK lockdown restrictions are easing, people are starting to repost what they're doing and it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I think it's still quite slow. I think we were expecting people to really like engage and get back out there, but actually people are still being quite cautious in the
I will say that the US is a very divisive and crazy place right now. I mean, it has been for a couple of years. But along this trend of experiences all, like we have big name brands playing in the space. For example, Disney World opened last week, and there's been a lot of back and forth about, is that the right thing to do? Is that the wrong thing to do? It is a bit of a tricky place for brands to be that have an experiential, live, in-person, face-to-face experience to offer.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing in the UK is a few examples of actually re-establishing those in-person experiences. So we've seen recently open the first socially distanced festival. It can only have sort of 400 or 500 people. Everything is really well restricted, but it gives that sense of experiences still. We're seeing lots of open spaces being turned into drive-ins. I know we've seen this all around the world. So I think brands are still finding their way to offer those in-person experiences, but I still think that the digital movement that we've seen throughout lockdown is still really important because we know from our data that people are still concerned about going out and mixing in large crowds. So there's going to be this movement and continued movement. I think that kind of leads on to that whole element of going live, the other trend that we want to talk about, because it gives that live streaming experience, but in a place that consumers feel a lot more safe.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that going live has become a trend with a lot of content around it, because I feel like, I don't know if you guys agree, but we've had this trend on the Trends database for quite some time, and it was kind of pretty stagnant for a while. There just wasn't much, like people would occasionally do a live thing on social media, but it was very on the fringe. And I think that's interesting with technology. It feels like it's always going to be habit driven, like people using mobile orders or people using these features on Instagram. It takes some event to make it either mainstream use and people just are forced to see it on their screens or something of that nature, because I feel like this time is really just driving habits that people adjust to. And I'm curious if this going live trend is going to be something that, because people have been relying on it, seeing celebrities doing concerts from their homes, if that's just going to become expectation, like you said, where people, some things maybe they still really crave that in-person experience, and we're seeing brands evolve to offer that. But I do think for some people, they're like, yeah, that was a great concert. I think that their vocals are good. Like they might just be comfortable sitting on their couch listening to a concert from now on.
Yeah, going live is a funny one, actually. So that live streaming has been a massive thing in China for quite some years now, to a point that my Chinese analyst actually said, I don't really understand why this is a trend. Like, it's not anything anywhere else. And it's just a platform for us. Like, it's just how people interact. So, yeah, it's been quite a thing for quite a while. But then weirdly, just before, so probably 6 months or so before COVID even really began, we started to see a lot more live streaming happening all throughout Southeast Asia as well. So we'd see fashion shows happening in Thailand that were being live streamed to everyone. And I think that level of access to a wider audience is really important as well. So brands are starting to understand that the things that they were doing on a much smaller scale, and was really quite exclusive and quite, not too many people could really attend, and they couldn't engage on that level with many people. Now they've got a much wider audience that can access it when they want to from their own homes. And I think there's a lot of power in that as well.
Definitely. Burberry announced their next fashion show for the fall is going to be live streamed. And in one of the press releases, it explicitly said, so it makes fashion accessible to all. And I think that is the beauty of that trend and doing live streaming, exactly as you said. Yeah.
And you can have that kind of that two-way interaction as well. Like you can, depending on obviously who's on the other end, shouldn't be heckling models, for example. But if you've got the other end who is, that's just rude. But if you've got other people on the other end who are just speaking to an audience, my favorite example actually is from Singapore. So when everything shut down, they had their circuit breaker restrictions in place. The wet markets there couldn't open anymore. And that was the way that a lot of people would buy their produce, buy their ingredients and stuff, their fresh produce. So all the vendors there got together and started doing a Facebook Live streaming auction. So people could, instead of actually going to the market, because obviously that wasn't allowed, they could just start to bid online and what I loved about it actually was, first off, it showed the personalities so it recreates the experience, which I think is really important. If you're going to switch to an online platform or extend that way, I think you've really got to recreate the experience that people love in the first place and that consumers engage with your brand for. And that, in this instance, was those quirky vendors and the whole hustle and bustle of the whole thing. And then, again, that access, like they sold out so quickly as well. So, and then just being able to use the technology that they had, like all they had was Facebook Live. They didn't have a website or anything like that. So I think there's an access point of view from the vendor's point of view as well.
I love your example, Alicia, because I feel that's the same happening here in Latin America, with one addition that it makes us feel closer, like it humanizes connection, right? For us here that come from a very collective culture is crucial. And there was a very nice example for one brand too that fully locked one of their stores. Of course, there were already restrictions on functioning, but they made sure that all of the health measurements and procedures were correct. Then one of their staff would be fully working from that store and showcasing people the products, showing them what they had, explaining, asking their questions and everything else. So they not only made live streaming their main e-commerce channel for the period, but they also humanized the way they would approach consumers from it. And that was a huge success because people would really feel that they were not talking to a robot, during a period that their emotions need so much to be comfort and they really crave social interaction. So that was a really nice move here. And it totally resonates with what Alicia is saying.
Yeah, Gucci have done a similar thing in Europe. They've got a store that's explicitly for live shopping. And I know that trend's quite big over in the APAC region, but we're seeing it increasingly come over into Europe, the Nordic markets as well. So, I didn't understand what it was. It's not, I had to work out what this live shopping was. But I think for that younger generation that are really into kind of social media and that stream of shopping as a channel, it's really resonating with them. And I think COVID's almost pushed it further than it would have, it's come to the market quicker than it would have done previously.
I was going to say it's a reinvention of the old, the people who would sell knives on TV. It's just that, but on the internet. It's brilliant. Look at this vacuum and how it can pick up a whole bowling ball. For the kids, it's brilliant.
I want that vacuum.
Yeah, I was going to build off of Vanessa's point about humanizing, because that made me think about how influencers have been leveraging this feature too. A blogger I followed for years, even before this year put everyone in quarantine, she would always do these Instagram live cooking demos. And it was just her in her kitchen. Her husband would film her, and it was very raw, natural. She's in sweats, and it really made me feel motivated to cook, because I was seeing her do it. I'm like, oh, that actually is easier than I thought it would be. And she really just took that. When quarantine started, she would do it more constantly, and it wasn't just about teaching to cook, but it was also joyful, because she's such a positive person. So it was just a nice way to see someone bringing joy to their kitchen, which I think helps people not only be motivated to cook, but obviously emotional relief was so important at the start of quarantine. So I think it was a nice way influencers leveraged it too.
We've seen quite a lot of that in this region as well, and I think brands are getting involved. And I think what they've done really cleverly is given us sort of secret ingredients, secret recipes that we wouldn't have known. So Pret did it, and I think Burger King did it. Again, it's about it's almost giving us that, not secret knowledge, but personalized. It's humanizing it. It's giving us something that we wouldn't actually get. So they've managed to even kind of position it in a positive element, the whole situation that we've had to go through.
So speaking about going live and live shopping, really the nature of retail has changed, at least here in the US in the past 6 months, from just going to go pick up my groceries, just head down the store, pick up what I need. And a lot of things have moved over to e-commerce. So now as things are reopening and we're entering recovery, I'm curious as to what everyone thinks about the combination of e-commerce and in-person retail and what that's going to look like moving forward.
Yeah, so we have a trend at Mintel called seamless spending, which has been tracking kind of this evolution as we go to cashless society, or how biometric payments are going to become the norm. And I think COVID-19 has accelerated that, because no one wants your cash right now. It's a handoff. It's more obviously contact involved. And I think, once again, that goes back to creating habits. On a personal note, I know when quarantine first started, my dad consistently kept going to the ATM to have cash on hand, and my mom kept telling him, no one wants your cash right now. And he finally came around where he would stop getting cash, because it was such a habit for him. Cash was safety, that was the mentality. And so I think for some people who've grown up in a society where they've been taught always have cash on hand, that's their, it's just a mentality. I think we're seeing that reverse now, where the safety is not have any contact with the person that you're having an exchange with. So a cashier. So they're just all this technology now, from Square to, I've just seen the whole gamut. We're just seeing that innovation is really taking off in cool ways. And I think that's also accelerating. If a customer can learn how to adapt to that, they're also going to adapt to other forms of technology. I just wrote an observation yesterday about Coke in the US. Their Freestyle machines, they've now are adding contactless technology. So if you hold your phone up to the Freestyle machine, there's going to be a QR code where it will just prompt, basically take the screen from the Freestyle machine and put it on your phone. So you're never touching the actual Freestyle machine itself. And I thought that was pretty cool innovation. But what I thought was smart there is that they didn't require an app download, because no one, I know myself included, isn't going to download an app on their phone just to pour a drink. So I think that's where it's going to be key, is figuring out what investment a person's going to make in technology. If you're constantly ordering from Taco Bell, for instance, then maybe you want the app on your phone because it's going to be convenient, or Starbucks if you're consistently ordering. But if for a simple transactional thing like pouring a drink, no one's going to take the time to put an investment into that. It needs to be quick. So I think that's where we're going to see some really interesting divides of how much investment you want your customer to put into technology and how much is going to be a quick transactional thing.
Yeah, I agree. I had a personal experience of having to download an app in order to buy something, and it was very frustrating, but it was the only option, and I wanted that objects. I'm not going to say which brand it is, but so there is that. And I think also on a wider level, just, as you said, having to download apps, they take up space. I think what we're seeing is the adoption of these kind of contactless technologies. And in our region, what I've noticed recently, specifically in more like the Middle East and African region, is a lot of startups, a lot of fintech investment coming in, not only from a consumer perspective, but from a brand perspective. So there's companies really helping those smaller businesses particularly utilize this technology. So all of the kind of back-end network is being generated now, so that as consumers continue to adopt this, it's going to be so instant that we automatically use our smartphones. And I think, as you mentioned, biometrics as well, that's only going to continue. I think the health benefits and the convenience will probably start to outweigh the kind of data security issues that a lot of consumers still have when they realise that actually this is protecting not only your financial information, but also your personal health when we're looking at the spread of diseases and viruses.
So Diana, someone mentioned to me this week that if you go out to a restaurant now in Chicago, a lot of the ordering is done on QR codes. Have you seen that? Ordering your payment just using QR codes to avoid contact with the vendors?
I haven't personally seen that, but I've also heard that that's become a form of people kind of showcasing what they want. And I think it really demonstrates how, I feel like whenever QR codes came onto the scene, I don't know, it was 5, 10, it was a while ago, people kind of laughed at the use of them. They were like, what are these things? No one's good. Like, I know they'd be on buses and people were like, no one's holding their phone up to this ad on a bus. So I think it really showcases the evolution of technology. Like at the time when it was created, no one really knew what to do with it. So it wasn't really used in a tactical way. And I think now that technology still exists, so we're seeing restaurants, places that never really knew how to use it, finding this functional value from it. So I think it is really cool that we're seeing it really kind of the evolution of technology, how it might start off being something people kind of scoff at and be like, oh, that's just a fad. But now it's really proving to have a lot of value for customers.
In London, we have Clipper boats. So they're like water taxis, and Uber are now partnering with them. And in order to get your ticket, it's a QR code on your phone. So that just demonstrates how much kind of breadth that those QR codes have. And I definitely think we're going to see them being used more and more and more.
I know one thing too, before things were really reopening, we saw a lot of reservation systems kind of expand their focus. So OpenTable used to only do restaurants with food, but they announced as things started to reopen, they would do reservations for bars and wineries. And for the wineries, they even included this feature where you would book it and have it paid for like in advance. So it was, even reservation systems were just enhancing how you would pay for an experience. So it's kind of taken care of before you even sit down, taking one worry off your plate of like, are they going to bring the check? Do we have to sit here and wait? Because I know a lot of places have time limits. So I think the more that these services can like take that fear, anxiety away from the person, they'll enjoy the experience even more and feel more comfortable with it.
So there's one that we've seen in Australia, I think it's called MePay, where you do the same thing with a QR code. You scan a thing, but it also calls over the person, the server, to come and take your order as well. So you don't have to actually get up from your table. Once you walk into that restaurant, you sit at your chair, which is the rule at the moment, that you can only sit in your chair and you can't be in a restaurant or a pub or whatever without being seated. And then somebody can come to you and they will take your order and they won't, they'll keep their distance and then walk off. And it keeps the entire thing quite clean as well. And then you can just walk straight back out again. I mean, the convenience of it does make a lot of sense from a service perspective as well, to kind of keep track of all of these things. I think once people start to get used to that entire process, I can't see why that wouldn't stick around for the longer term.
Yeah, I feel the same. And I totally agree with Diana. Like, we would be having QR codes around for a while, but nobody would actually use them on a regular basis. And now they're really promising to be a big thing. But the seamless spending trend that she also spoke about, I think it has like a huger meaning here in Latin America, because our digital literacy was not that high before the pandemic. So it really pushed us into the digital world. And we've seen so much from that. And I think before applying that to our experiential things or like the consumption back to the new normal, to reality. I think it's first pushing us to virtual banking or pushing us to understand how digital money works and what we can make out of it. For example, WhatsApp starting a banking process here in Brazil some weeks ago. It's holding up, but I personally, I'm sure that it's going to be back again because it's an easy way to do banking while on a platform that people are already used to deal with. But like little things like the financial support government provided to people here were fully done on digital. Even cards do not exist. They're virtual too. So it's kind of pushing us as a region into the digital banking thing before we can really learn on how to benefit from the other tools that come from it. But yeah, we've seen a lot of restaurants adopting QR codes or a lot of small businesses going online, either by opening their own e-commerces or endorsed by huger brands who want to support them, or being helped by consumers who want to see their communities succeed. So they are organizing their e-commerces that will help pushing all of this movement too. So I believe this is a really complex situation that we're going through. And basically it has been showing us from the basics that there's a new world on digital that brands can help us explore and help us merge into it, because we don't know the benefits that they can provide us like on a wider view.
That's a really good point. Like to your point exactly, in Southeast Asia, I think it's 73% of people in the area, in the region are unbanked, meaning that they don't have any kind of bank account. So that effectively locks them out from online banking, online shopping, ride hailing, all these different kinds of things, food service, food delivery, which means that if they are stuck in their houses and they can't order anything online, how are they accessing all of these services? Like how are they getting out there and doing all of these things? So I think brands certainly, and we're seeing big ones like Grab is the Uber equivalent in Southeast Asia. We're seeing that kind of start to supposedly move into this kind of digital banking area. There's always so much data that they've got through by virtue of having, the transport data that they've got on people, on consumers, the way that they eat and shop and all that kind of thing anyway. To have that banking data as well would be kind of massive, obviously. And then to Helen's point as well, what we're seeing on the other side of it is brands like Amazon coming in and helping connect all the Kirana stores through India. And providing that financial infrastructure for them, so that, like you say, when consumers are ready to jump into that kind of space and they're comfortable doing so, that whole thing's going to be set up for them, and it's going to be a really seamless transition.
I kind of echo what you've said about the two elements. So in the specifically in the Africa region, those unbanked customers, they're now being, as you said, giving opportunities to use WhatsApp. A lot of the telecoms providers are introducing ways for them to spend. So everything gets done by a telephone number. They don't necessarily need internet access. They don't need a bank account. But then we've got the other side where it's much more high tech. So it's really interesting how that trend can be applied to so many different demographics, whether it's, the more established and developed countries where we're using biometrics and eye technology to the lower ones where we're using, their phone numbers to an SMS in a lot of cases as well.
Yeah, I've certainly seen a lot of SMS as well. Yeah, WhatsApp, just texting for groceries, that kind of thing, through India as well. So it's a very fascinating space, and watching the two kind of come together, I think is really interesting. But it's good to see also that whoever's kind of picking up that slack, whether it's banks or brands or whoever else, those people aren't being left behind in that space either.
So clearly the events of 2020 have led to some acceleration of our trends. I'm excited to hear just from the entire trends team how this is going to impact all of our trends moving forward. And I know you guys are working on a lot of content around that. So as you guys are coming up with all of these great ideas, I'm just writing them down. I'm just scribbling as fast as I can. But a lot of them really struck me as great takeaways for brands on how to move forward. So a couple things that I noted, I think it was Alicia that said this, thinking of shifting offerings from extroverted to introverted. That's just a beautiful way to encapsulate this while people are inside or just at some measure socially distanced from others. How can you make your offerings feel more introverted? bring more personality to your digital platforms. I mean, all brands can do this and really benefit from this because people do want to feel like they're interacting with someone else on the other side of the screen. Even if it is a chatbot, even if it is not a live feed, but how can you bring a little brand personality and a little human touch to that? I thought that was a great idea. And just more broadly, brands can't rely on old habits right now because they're shifting so quickly just by necessity. So brands that are used to the way people use their products, interact with their services, they really need to be thinking very deeply right now about if those habits are going to stay. And then maybe most importantly, QR codes, guys, they're not going to die. They're never going to die. We thought they were going to die a long, slow, painful death, but they're still here. So having that functional technology, when the consumer need rises to meet that technology, it's going to take off. And QR codes are a great example of that. So I wanted to thank all of my panel for sharing their thoughts and ideas that I could steal and write on all my Post-it notes here. And thank our listeners for hanging in there. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast content. We'll be here next week with another episode of Mintel's Little Conversation.